Hey, it's Fox from Inferno Fox Gaming, and today we all here are celebrating what is not only an unsung hero of the NES and Castlevania franchise, but one of the many founding pillars in the Metroidvania genre before that was even like a recognized thing. I am, of course, talking about Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. To celebrate this, again, I'm joined today by four amazing guests. They are excellent YouTube content creators and live streamers, and links to all their sites will be listed in the description below. So make sure you take the time to check out and subscribe to their respective channels and see what they have to offer. I cannot recommend their content enough. And I'm just gonna take a moment here to introduce each and every one of them so that you, our audience, if you're not familiar with them, you can get to know them. First, we have Feral Inferno. Now, Feral is a frequent collaborator of Inferno Fox Gaming, and not only does he create some fantastic content here on YouTube, but he also live streams fantastic video games on Saturday evenings. So thank you, Feral, for joining us here today.
Hey, thanks for having me and thanks for the amazing plug. I appreciate that.
No problem. Next up are a pair of individuals from the Super Retro Force. We have Rad from Rad Bash Gaming, another frequent collaborator who creates fun pickup videos, has podcast style interviews, live streams with friends, and of course, again, is one of the founding members of the Super Retro Force and more, all on YouTube here. Thank you so much for joining us, Rad.
Hey, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
And definitely you're looking as pumped as I am here.
Oh yeah, vibes
Uh,
all around.
another half of the pair from Super Retro Force is a man whom I couldn't not have for a Castlevania discussion, and that is the Mad Belmont. Focusing on this fantastic franchise and much more, Mad's got us covered for some fun and scary content on his channel. So thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you for having me, man. What is going on, everyone? It's so good to be here and talk about this franchise and this game right here. So yeah, I had to have it. I had
Yes.
to have it ready to show off, man. So yeah, I'm ready to get into this, man.
Awesome, awesome. And our last guest is Hungry Gorilla. Not only has she been providing excellent content here on YouTube for some time on like classic video games, but she also live streams on Twitch Sundays, Monday and Thursday evenings, and Friday afternoons. On a personal note, and hopefully I don't embarrass her too much, she's one of a number of YouTube content creators that inspired me to create my YouTube channel here. So it's an
Wow.
absolute honor and a huge shout out to her for all of the excellent content that she has produced over the years, as well as for jumping on here and talking about one of our favorite games. So welcome, HG. We are glad to have you.
That's so nice. Thank you so much for saying so. And it's just so nice to be able to meet other folks that not only love retro, but also love Castlevania, because I only discovered the series a couple of years ago, and I'm very late to the party, and I'm always happy to talk about it with others. So thanks so much again for having me on.
Absolutely. And like I said, definitely an honor to have not just you, but our other guests as well. Super grateful to have this discussion. But let's jump right into it. We're talking Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest, and it's a sequel from what was a more linear experience from the first entry. And of course, said sequel was released on the Famicom Disk System back on August 28th of 1987, then came to North America via password-powered cartridge, December of 1988. So I got to ask you guys, and Farrell, I'll start with you. When and how did you first play Simon's Quest?
I don't remember that. And it's funny because I am usually the guy about memories and all that, but I don't remember the exact first time I played Simon's Quest. It was always at somebody's house. And because I never really owned Castlevania games until later on, it was always a rental. It was at people's houses because it was like, money was limited. So I was always more of a Mega Man, guy, but I still loved Castlevania. So I got to play it at people's houses. So I had never got to finish it until about a year and a half ago when I was like, hey, I'm going to play it live. I mean, it's finally going to happen. I'm finally going to go from start to finish and finish this game once and for all. And I first time I played it would probably be early '90s, and it was just through rentals and playing at friends' houses.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, it's funny how the whole communal experience with video games was such a thing. I feel like when we were growing up. So sorry, Rad, Farrell and I are maybe a bit of more old dogs, so that's kind of how we experience a lot of the consoles, but
Y'all be old. That's fine. I'm young. No need to be apologizing. I'm good, bro. My back
I was
feels
still
fine.
there around me and Rad's time. It's just, it was fading by that point.
So Red, I think you mentioned off before we began that you first played this entry back. Was it back when you were 15, or was that just the
Yeah.
last time that you played it?
No, that was the first and the last time that I played it was back when I was 15. That was my brother and I had just watched the what's that guy's name? The Angry Video Game Nerd, and he did that whole video on it. We're like, wow, let's see if it's really that bad, and that was why we went out of our way to play it.
Gotcha. How about you, Mad Belmont? When was the first time that you played it?
I first played it shortly after I'd gotten into the franchise. I got into it as a young kid. I've said this on my channel before. I was 4 years old when I first got into the series. Didn't know what I was doing, but I loved it regardless. And I had rented the first game, the third game, and the fourth game. And then shortly after that, I rented this game because they didn't have it the first time around in my rental store. Like Farrell was saying, I rented a lot of games back in the day. So, yeah, I rented it back then and I enjoyed it.
Nice. Yeah, it was definitely a lot of fun for me. We actually owned this one. We picked it up because we grew up playing the first one when I remember being 4 years old, me and my brothers playing it, well, me dying, but my brothers playing it. And then when Simon's Quest came out, I think our parents bought that for us because my dad recognized because he loved the music and recognized the game title, and he's like, "Oh, well, let's pick this up for you." So I think it was like six or so when I played this, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I could actually play this and not die like so often being a little kid." So HG, how about you? I think you had mentioned in your videos as well as before we started that you got into the Castlevania series relatively recently.
Yeah, that's right. So the very first Castlevania experience I had was actually almost 6 years ago to the day, a couple of days ago.
Oh,
And it was
wow.
in 2018 when I was actually over on my streams doing this thing on Monday nights called Meat Stick Mondays. So we were actually doing games that had meat in them because, of course, when you're the hungry gorilla and everybody comes into your stream telling you that they're going to feed you, which is very strange. But anyway, I played Castlevania 1 on October 1st, 2018, and couldn't get out of it. I couldn't finish it. And then later, I ended up getting into Simon's Quest, and it was early 2019, I think, when I jumped into it. And I loved it because I love those side scrolling action adventures. I adore anything that resembles Faxanadu. If you're
Ooh.
at all familiar with any content that I've ever made, you know that that's my favorite NES game. And it was kind of the lead into other games like Faxanadu that brought me to Simon's Quest eventually. And when I played it, I just fell head over heels. And from there, I went into the rest of the series. But that's a story for another day because we're just talking about Simon's Quest. But yeah, 2019 was the time for me.
Now, next question for you too on that. So you did place Simon's Quest at the top of your list of the best and worst classic like Castlevania games. We're going to make sure to put a link to that in the description below. Specifically with two, and you sort of alluded to that. Um, what caught your eye regarding Castlevania 2 that topped the list compared to the other entries? Was it the fact that it was so similar to Faxanadu, or was there anything else with Simon's Quest versus the rest of the series that you mentioned?
Well, I'm a sucker for anything macabre. I've always been since I was a kid. And to have a game that not only ties in RPG elements, even though they're very loose, they're still there, along with the adventuring and the equipment upgrades. And it's almost even beyond a lot of that too, like just the setting of the game and the story of the game. and just how dire everything is, it kind of sucked me in. Simon is actually just on his way. He's on death's door if you do not help him complete this quest, right? And there's something that was kind of compelling to me about it. But anything that's just an adventure game that involves jumping and fighting stuff with some kind of implement, I'm all over. So, yeah, it was a mix of that macabre, a little bit about the character, obviously about the story as well. It was just like lightning in a bottle for me, like an extension of something I already loved, but tying in something a little bit that I also loved in the horror genre a little bit.
Nice. Now, Farrell, I know that you, like me, are also an RPG nut. Is that why you have so much of a love for Simon's Quest, or what about it caught your eye?
Well, I mean, for me, it was kind of the similarity to my very first Metroidvania game style game, and that was the Goonies 2, also made by Konami on the
Ooh.
NES. And I grew up with that. That was the Metroidvania style game that I started with. And when I played Castlevania 2, I was like, wow, this is a lot like the Goonies 2. Obviously, there's some differences there. You know, the Goonies has a few other weird things about it. You know, where the you go through the doors and the corridors and things like that. But yeah, I really liked that connection for me. And then right after I had tried out Simon's Quest, I also played Fax Anadu as well. I did have that one. So I think it was like a bargain bin type of game back in the day. So it's one of those games I got for I think Easter or Christmas or something. And yeah, I fell in love with that kind of style of game. So that's what really drew me to Simon's Quest and then the other Metroidvania style Castlevania games after that as well.
And man, how about you? What with Simon's Quest helps to kind of delineate that from the rest of the series?
It was just how different it was compared to the games that I've been playing beforehand. I played 3 games that were linear, stage based action platformers. And then here's this game where I can just go anywhere and do anything I want to. And it it was that differentiating from the other ones that really just made it pop out to me. I'm like, wow, this is fun being able to just go wherever I want to.
Yeah, and that's definitely very true. Sort of that freedom to just go and explore the world, as HD had mentioned, how macabre that it is, how dead looking and everything, but with such an upbeat and baller soundtrack, like Bloody Tears, especially that being the highlight, touring the world, but yet you got this just great cheery theme for daytime, but I always felt that that helps to accentuate the fear that you have once night strikes, because that theme for nighttime also excellent, really adds to the whole, okay, things are a lot scarier, they're darker, enemies are 2 times as strong, it takes 2 times as many hits to kill them, and just it really adds to that whole sense of foreboding, and so you gotta hit pause to look at the time to see, okay, is it almost time for it to be night, is it, oh, just a horrible night to have a curse, and but just dealing with that, or if you're on death's door and you're in a town and you're trying to get to the church and you've got one little bar of health and you're trying to avoid the zombies, and you're just waiting for it to hit 6 a.m. so that it can be daytime and you can get into that church and recover. Man, that's
Cannot tell you how many times that has happened to me over the years playing this game.
because
Fighting green zombies outside the church.
yes, and it's like you have no lives left. You have 255 hearts. You're like 3 or 4 things away from gaining a level, but you don't want to mess with anything and get hit by one of those zombies, or one of those flying crows. I think that's in some of the towns too. Oh, not that I have any sort of like PTSD with any of this. No, nothing like that at all. It's really interesting, Rad, hearing how you had gotten introduced to this particular game, seeing the not so generous review of the Angry Video Game Nerd. How do you feel that this entry had sort of differentiated itself in your mind compared to other Castlevania games that you had played?
So at the time, that was the first one I had played. Big horror fan, everybody knows that. So when I saw it, I was like, oh, this is cool. It's not horror, but it has the elements. Um, Looking at it now, it was the first in the Metroidvania style stuff, and because of that, we got all these other games. Playing one, it's very linear, And I mean, it's fun, but as somebody who doesn't like, I like more of like a choice, I guess. It was cool to kind of, sit down and be able to go. It's not where you want it or when you want it, but for the most part, you could for what it was. But yeah, no, I definitely think it paved the way. And without that, we wouldn't have gotten where we are with the series now.
Over Farrell's left shoulder, that is probably one of the best Metroidvania games ever made. Ever made, Symphony of the Night. But you couldn't have had Symphony of the Night without Castlevania Simon's Quest. It really helped, as Rad said, pave the way for such a title. But yeah, it's absolutely classic. One of the 11 out of 10 game. And one of the nice things with the many of the gameplay aspects with Simon's Quest, of course, the RPG element, being able to sort of gain levels to be able to increase your health bar. Also felt like you didn't take as much damage when you hit enemies, but maybe that was more so like my thought process just because the bar was bigger. Uh, in general, that sort of free exploration and everything like that, as well as some of the mansions. Did you guys feel like Simon's Quest was an easier entry in the series? And when I say that, let me stick with NES, SNES, Game Boy, and Genesis. We're going to stick with the retro uh 2D platforming games. Farrell, I'll start with you. Do you feel Simon's Quest easiest of the Castlevania?
Yeah, I thought it yes and no. Okay, I'll say yes and no. So in terms of combat, absolutely. I mean, you can kind of just skip through the bosses as well. Like you could go to the next room. From a combat perspective, I thought it was very easy. But the difficulty for me really came with how cryptic it was. Especially, I know there's a part where when you're going on the boat, like you had to go like a certain like way on the boat, the ferryman, and like he'll take you to the next. Like there was a certain dungeon I was missing, I remember, and I was like searching for hours. And of course, I'm doing it on a live stream. I'm like, oh, everybody's of course leaving by this point because I'm like an hour looking for this thing, and I was like, oh, you had to like I think hold a piece of garlic or something, and or the blue orb while you're going on the boat. I'm like, oh man, that part was very hard, but compared to like the rigors of Castlevania 1 and Castlevania 3, it, combat wise and platforming wise was kind of a breeze. The only thing platforming I thought was like kind of difficult, and I was like, oh, he's kind of had to learn it, was like there was those moving blocks above the
Oh
river.
yeah.
And I would always I was like, okay, platformer. I played Mega Man. I played Mario. I know to platform on these games. So I'm like, okay, go wait for the highest point and then jump. I'm like, and I wouldn't make it. So again, on my stream, like I'm dying and I'm dying and I'm dying. Boom, 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 boom. You can see the water splashing out. I'm like, man, what am I doing wrong? And eventually I noticed like, okay, jump at like as it's getting like towards the highest point and then jump. And it kind of like almost gives you like a little bit of boost because it's like kind of jump a little bit higher. I felt,
Yeah,
I don't
like
know.
it's pushing you upwards.
Yeah, like it gives you kind of like that momentum. Whereas like if you do it at like the lowest point, like your jump is a little bit lower. Like that part was difficult to figure out. But like once you had it, you kind of had it. But yeah, I would say it's one of the easier ones.
That's fair. And you definitely make a good point with kind of how awkward some of the platforming aspects like that were. I one of my things with the platforming that um wasn't hard, just frustrating, were the invisible holes, specifically that were in the mansions, where it was almost required to take two steps, throw a holy water, take two steps, throw a holy water, because you never knew. Sometimes the little skeleton guys holding the sword and the shield that they would never use, they would walk. You could tell where the holes were, where they would just turn around. But if you didn't have that, if you didn't have the holy water, you'd be in for a bad time. And it's pretty much mandatory to be able to progress in the game anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Holy water's your best friend in that game.
gosh. So Grumbles, want to ask you, do you feel that the Simon's Quest is the easier or easiest in these retro classic style Castlevania games?
I would say, yeah. I would say I agree with Farrell that the combat component of it is definitely on the easier side. I'll also say, though, that it's only easy when you know where you're going and what you have to do. Because the first time I played this game, well, I got obsessed. I couldn't stop playing it. I meant to go to bed at a reasonable hour, and I usually start streaming around 7:30 at night. But I ended up going till like almost 4 o'clock in the morning, and I had to work the next day. So I got very little sleep, but I beat it in one go with a couple of hints from chat. And I didn't know where I was needing to go or where to buy stuff. I was making notes, drawing my own maps out, all that good stuff. So I think if you don't have the luxury of playing into the wee hours of the morning like I did, it would probably take somebody coming to it for the first time a little while, especially with how misleading some of the hints can be, and how, of course, how cryptic, as we've mentioned, some of the aspects of the game, like the kneeling at the cliff and all of that sort of stuff, can also be too. So I think it's like Castlevania 3, I think, is the meanest game in the whole series. Like in terms of its difficulty, personally, I find it's just the worst. It hurts my feelings. I really struggle with it. And I know for me, Simon's Quest felt fun compared to that. And whether it's fairer, whether the combat's easier, it's hard to kind of qualify what about it makes it more enjoyable. But it does feel easier overall, and maybe because it's just not mean as well, like some of the other games can feel.
Yeah, and that is definitely fair. Sorry, I was reliving some past trauma regarding Castlevania 3 and fighting the three phases of Dracula, and I just
And
uh
the stair levels.
oh my
Hmm.
gosh.
The
All the
Just
bone
auto
pillars
scrolling.
just shooting their fireballs at you as you're climbing up the stairs. Oh God.
oh gosh.
That's recent. That's recent PTSD for me because that was just what, a year and a half ago I played that. So.
I watched that, by the way.
Yeah, oh my gosh. It just but another amazing game, but I do agree with you, Grumbles, that is probably one of the meanest of the Castlevania series. I was just thinking of a Castlevania Bloodlines just because like that one is a tough one, but it was also one that like I've actually played start to finish and was able to beat in like an hour and a half after I've already played through it once, and I just played through it like for the first time 2 years ago. If you guys could ever believe that, that's kind of crazy. But man, how about you? You agree with everybody so far that Simon's Quest easiest of these?
Oh yeah, 100%. All the other games that ain't Simon's Quest are some of the hardest games I've ever played. So getting into this, especially when I was a kid, having an easier game really was a breath of fresh air for sure. But then you have things like what Farrell mentioned with the cryptic messages that the villagers would give you, and then you've got the hidden blocks, like you were saying. Like, you've got things that are out to kill you in this game, like the poison swamp, for instance.
Oh gosh.
Oh my god, that was the because I didn't have the right items to get through it the first time I did it, and I'm sitting there because I'm stubborn, and I'm like, I'm gonna get through here without going back to town. Never did. Did it for like an hour and a half, and I was just sitting there beating my head against the wall, and I'm just like, fine, I guess I gotta go back to town. But yeah, from a combat and a platforming standpoint, Simon's Quest is definitely the easiest out of all those games.
And it doesn't help that those villagers lie. Like they'll
Yeah,
literally lie or just
and they warn you about that in the manual too. They do.
But
They
hey,
warn
that's
you
kind of
about it.
realistic. That's kind of right. That's like real life.
oh my gosh. It's funny. And then when you go to the I think one of the villages, they keep asking Simon to just stay there with them or something like that. And it's like, no, you gotta revive Dracula so you can double kill him again. Like you gotta remove that curse. You don't have time to be sitting in these villages. Rad, how about you? Would you say Simon's Quest easiest of these Castlevanias? Same thing?
So I would be lying if I said I didn't cheat my way through it. We definitely were looking up walkthroughs the entire time we played it. But it's funny you all say it's easy because I always hear the opposite. I always hear people say they struggled with it. So that's why when we played it, we just pulled up a guide and kind of walked us through it. So it's kind of interesting to see. But I definitely don't think it's hard. Like I don't get hard vibes from it, especially the other ones I've played. Those have taken up too many of my nights. So that one, I think we knocked out in like a day. So yeah, I definitely don't think it was hard.
Bonus question before I move on to the next thing. We were sort of talking about Castlevania 3 being the meanest one. Since I've got a bunch of Castlevania aficionados here, I'll ask you, Mad, I got to start with you because you are the Mad Belmont. Hardest Castlevania game, you are not limited to retro.
Okay, hardest one I've ever played. It's the one over Farrell's right shoulder. It is Rondo of Blood. Without question, that is the one. I 100% at that game because I went and got the platinum trophy for the Requiem collection. That that cemented it right there.
No.
All the extra stages and doing them all with Richter because I have a strict Belmont only policy if I can, if I got the option. So yeah, that was hard. Very hard.
So you didn't do the cheat mode, aka Maria.
I didn't do Maria. No, I did not do Maria. Well, I had to for a trophy. I had to beat Dracula with her, but other than that, I didn't use Maria at all.
I would definitely say Rondo of Blood is like way up there on the difficulty scale for Castlevanias. Rad, how about you?
Hardest one, so it would be Dawn of Sorrow. That's it's the DS one. Yeah,
one of the DS ones. Yeah,
I just finished that. I just finished that.
Did you play it on DS? Did you play it on the consoles?
The consoles.
Okay, so let me tell you why I struggled with it. I have big sausage fingers. Okay, big sausage fingers. So I'm a big dude with a little device trying to play and stylus, and it was the hardest experience I've ever had in my entire life. It's my favorite Castlevania game, but yeah, it was. I'm on a plane like hunched trying to play with big old fingers, and yeah, it was exhausting. It took a toll on me.
So the console thing has the rewind feature. The only time that I used it was when I messed up the drawing thing on the console. And the console is you don't have to draw with on like for the Switch. The Switch has that when you undock it. You can just use buttons. Yeah, for some reason I just couldn't get the button combinations right. I must have failed the what is it? The Simon back when I was a kid, the press yellow, green, yellow. I must have failed that as a little kid because I never got that on the first try fighting all the bosses, even on the easiest.
Don't worry, I didn't either.
So I'm so bad with that. But yeah, I could definitely see it because like some of the bosses in Dawn of Sorrow are like ridiculous, like especially like the last 2 or 3. I remember freaking Soma was like 62 or 63, and I had the best equipment, and enemies were still damaging me for like 100. Like seriously, what? You have to be near
especially
flawless.
if you go for that true ending. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Grumbles, how about you? Do you still believe Castlevania 3 is the hardest because it's the meanest, or what do you think?
I feel like Castlevania 3 for me has the most trolling in it in terms of level design and enemy placement. And I get clipped all the time doing nonsense things in my streams. There's stuff from those streams where I went to go jump through a door and got struck by a bat off of a pendulum into the pit for the 1 millionth time. There's stuff in that game like the doppelganger fight, or the fact that death has 2 phases and I didn't know that there was a second phase and was glory jumping all over the place and got pummeled by a skull that appeared out of nowhere. There's a whole bunch of things like that in Castlevania 3 that made it very frustrating. But one thing, for better or worse, that Castlevania 3 has is the unlimited continues, which are also merciful and merciless because there's a double-edged sword to that. Sometimes you just need a game to tell you it's time to go home. Okay, you suck, you can't finish this game, turn it off, come back another time, right? Like Bloodlines does that. Bloodlines was hard for me because I lost all my lives and all my continues. I had 1 life to get through the final gauntlet of that game.
Oh,
so that game
wow.
was disproportionately difficult because I didn't realize that the passwords kept track of your continues and how many lives you had. But then you look at something like Dracula X, which is perfect right up until the final freaking boss, where there's holes in the floor and that guy laughs every 5 seconds, and it's just like a mockery. I feel like so many Castlevania games have difficulty for different reasons, but if I have to pick one as like the ultimately mean one, Castlevania 3 for me takes the cake hands down, no questions asked. But I think a lot of them are hard for other reasons too.
Played through Dracula X once, and I think I got stuck on that. Okay, twice. I played it once on an emulator and just gave up on that Dracula X fight. And then I will admit that when I played it on the Castlevania Advance Collection, when I got to the Dracula fight, I did use save states to bring me back to the beginning of the fight. Whenever I got knocked off into the hole, I like I don't want to lose all my stuff, and then I don't want to deal with lives, and I'll just I've got to use the save states, otherwise I'm never gonna get past this
Oh
thing.
yeah, don't be afraid to use them. I use them. I went through the games without them. I paid my dues. Okay, I'm using my save states now.
Fake gamers. Fake gamers.
But Farrell, how about you? Hardest Castlevania.
It's funny. This actually came up. I just had a bonfire like a week or two ago in my backyard with some people, and this came up actually. They asked me like, "Hey, what's the hardest Castlevania you played?" And one of my buddies who does appear on some of my streams, Pete Muna 77, he was telling me, he was like, "Rondo, right? Rondo," kind of like what Matt was saying. And I was like, "Nah, I thought Rondo was pretty easy actually." With the exception of that shaft fight, like that was brutal. That was
Yeah.
brutal.
Yep.
That was
Yep.
brutal. But
Mhm.
I gotta agree with Hungry Gorilla. Like it's Castlevania 3, hands down. I am still like I've got like nightmares, like literal like nightmares in my actual sleep of that green staircase level that's like boom, boom, like it's rising
Oh,
and
the
you're
auto
going up
scrolling
Mhm.
one. Yeah,
and
yeah, I know what you're talking
you got the
about.
sparks going around and you got like skeleton knights and they're jumping all over the place, and then sometimes like there's like little glitches like with the sparks, and like they something will appear on the screen a little bit too soon, like when you're trying to jump up because it's kind of blind, you have to remember where everything is. There's the other staircase level with the like Mad Belmont was saying with the skeleton shooters as well that are going after you. Oh, I spent the most time, I'm pretty sure, on those levels, and some of the boss fights were really brutal too. And without I thought Sypha was great for the bosses. Without Sypha, those bosses would have been even harder. But yeah, Castlevania 3, hands down for me.
Yeah, I think mine will probably be like I'm kind of like how Grumbles is, where it depends on like the game or what you're measuring it by. Like you got the meanest. I would say Castlevania 3. If I'll say one other qualifier, and I'm going to say the stupidest, and that would be Haunted Castle, the OG, the arcade
Oh,
one,
yeah, yeah.
because
I agree.
I've actually played that at an arcade years ago, and the I'll try and keep this PG. The jerk who had set it up, because you can set up the settings, had a thing where you take one hit, you lose half of your damage. You take another hit and you die. And what happens when you die in Haunted Castle? Game over. There are no lives. That's it. So yeah, throwing in 50 cents, because of course the same jerk, 50 cents to play the game, which I was definitely so glad that the Castlevania Dominus collection had done the remaster, which is Haunted Castle Revisited.
Oh, that's
Uh,
a full remake.
yeah,
That's not just a remaster. That's a remake.
yeah, you could even consider that like its own sort of like entry, just because of how well it redoes everything. Well, actually did redo the entire game on its. It feels like its own evergreen Castlevania game, like what it should have been, like if it was made for a console. So, for our friends listening, definitely recommend the Castlevania Dominus collection, just because like again those DS games, like Rad was saying, Dawn of Sorrow, fantastic game, but Haunted Castle Revisited. I remember Mad Belmont had said that, and I'm still thinking this is true, Mad. It's one of your contenders for Game of the Year.
Oh, it is. It is. It's my front runner.
And like just the music in Haunted Castle, the OG is actually really decent. It takes that and remasters that, kind of like puts that up to 11. I love the music to the series. So good. So good.
If you play through Castlevania 1, you'll be hearing Heart of Fire quite a bit because you'll probably be playing through that stage. It's the death stage.
Yes.
Ah,
Quite a bit,
yes,
though.
especially with that casual killer hallway close to
Yeah.
the end of the stage.
It's
I have
like,
perfected that hallway, by the way.
and it's like, dude, like if I have to keep dying on the stage, at least the music is just so freaking awesome. It
Right?
just slaps hard. One of the so we were kind of talking like just how Simon's Quest really paved the way for a lot of the Metroidvanias, and like us, a lot of the game developers nowadays have really looked at Simon's Quest as an inspiration for a lot of their games, and this really is evident in a number of like the indies and really even beyond indies. So one of the things I'll ask my crew, and Farrell, I'll ask you first because you sort of alluded to your answer before we started recording. Have you played any of the indies that have released in the last decade or so that were direct inspirations, or anything that you feel sort of spoke to what the legacy that Simon's Quest has created?
Yeah, and there's been a lot of them, especially in the indie scene. There was one that I played that I didn't really like. I thought I was going to like a lot more than I would, but it was like Momodora, I think it was. Um,
Reverie Under the Moonlight?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I was that one. I kind of like just fell out of, but like there's of course Cave Story. I think that's like the original
Oh,
kind of indie, right? The
my
original indie.
heart. Yes.
Yeah,
I
and
love
very
Cave
very
Story.
interesting, very cryptic as well. I definitely got the Simon's Quest vibes from this game because like there's so many like different ways to play the game, and I think
Yep.
there's some lying as well from some of the characters, like we have in Simon's Quest.
And
I got
multiple endings.
I got to go with like Hollow Knight. Hollow Knight was so good. It was so good, and it was. I thought this game was actually kind of cryptic as well. It's fairly cryptic and very long for a Metroidvania game. Very long game. So I think I sunk like 50 something hours in this. So it's like, oh, I'm gonna play something quick because usually the Metroidvania games you get through them maybe like 10, 15, maybe 20 hours. I was not expecting to sink 50 awesome and also infuriating hours into Hollow Knight.
Oh, that's
Especially when you lose a life and you have to go get your spoils and you lose a life before you get your spoils again. It's the worst.
oh my
Um,
gosh.
Owl Boy was another one that was a nice little
Oh,
surprise. A lot of
yes.
fun. A lot of fun, especially it kind of like reminded me a mixture of Simon's Quest and Dracula's Curse because there
Yep.
was a different kind of characters that you could partner up with. So it kind of reminded me of that a little bit. But yeah, Owl Boy was pretty cool. I liked that game. It was a cute little game, a lot of puzzles as well to solve. And there's a few I want to actually mention that I haven't played yet, and I'm actually looking forward to, and that is Scarlet Symphony. Just picked this up. Looks like an awesome. Actually, all three of these games I just picked up in the same exact order. But Scarlet Symphony looked really good. A lot like Symphony of the Night. Um, Record of Lotus War,
Hmm.
based off of an anime, and it looked exactly like Symphony of the Night when I saw the previews for it, like the graphics and everything. So obviously with the anime aesthetic, but that looked great, and I've heard really good things about that. And another one I'm looking forward to playing at some point in my backlog of like 1,000 games is Euphoria 2, which is a sequel to a Metroid game that was on the Famicom. Didn't come here. I think it might have come out in Europe. I can't remember if it was in Europe or not, but I know it was did not come out in the US, the original Euphoria. So game I always actually wanted to try was the original. I was hoping they'd have a physical for the original as well, but hey, happy to try out the sequel here.
Nice. Yeah, those are some really good Simon's Quest inspired indies and everything. I have the most experience with Hollow Knight, of course. I think that's probably the most like well known. I would guess. I'm just based on reputation alone. Definitely a really good but very difficult Metroidvania. Let me ask our friendly meat gal HG over here. Any indies or anything like that that you feel released in the last decade that were inspired by Simon's Quest?
Well, I don't know that I've dabbled much in I'll call it modern stuff, like even stuff from the last 10 years very often. Um, can I cheat And name a cool retro game that I played that was kind of Simon's Questy that
Oh,
is not part of the
cheat away.
Castlevania series.
Yeah,
Okay.
cheat
'Cause
away.
that's been
Hey,
mostly where.
Fox uses save states, so you can
Oh,
you're
That
allowed.
was one time on one game. I'm a
yeah.
real gamer.
Oh my gosh. If I had to pick something that was like exploration based, kind of RPG-ish light, maybe question mark, I'd have to go with the Battle of Olympus because
Oh,
that game
yes.
is it's so good. I
So
loved
good.
it. It was amazing. I just discovered that one last year for the first time and it blew my mind and it was so much it had so many of the things that I loved about Simon's Quest and all of those other kinds of games that are similar to it. 100% it would be Battle of Olympus. I guess I could name like an indie title I played that came out in 2018 called Lizard. It's not exactly like how would I even qualify this game? You get different lizard suits and you can go around and explore different things. Like there's not much of a story. You're just out on an adventure. But it was made by a very nice fellow um, named Brad who actually developed the game and also made physical cartridges for the NES, which was how I first experienced it.
Wow.
And it is a cool little title that does have some kind of open world exploration stuff to it, but there's no whipping in it. So I don't know if it would really be like Simon's Quest inspired or even have many RPG elements, but the open world exploration part of it is definitely there, and I really did like that one too.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I'll have to take a look at into Lizard because I actually haven't heard of that one before. But Battle of the Olympus, I'm a huge Zelda 2 fan, and it's essentially like a better running Zelda 2, and it definitely is really, really good. Absolutely
Yes.
agree.
Yes, it is.
Now, Rad, same question. What games have you played, or have you played any of the indies released in the last decade you think are inspired from Simon's Quest?
I mean, Farrell picked most of the ones I would have picked. I would say Curse of the Moon won, but that'll get me hate just like it did on our Metroidvania-like games. So I'm not going to say that. So I'm going to say Curse of the Moon 2 because that there's no one can deny that one. So yeah, those ones definitely. I mean, they're Castlevania clones, like through and through.
Yeah, they absolutely, but they're decent. It's like,
They're good.
sometimes when you have a taste for Coke, Coca-Cola, and there's only
You had to
Pepsi.
specify that.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean, look, when you have people on the internet, you know how YouTube comment sections are. You got to specify these things, man.
you have to. It's pretty much required at this point. But
When you're
like,
craving Coke, Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola.
when you want because I'm from the Midwest, we just call it a Coke. Like, so let me make sure for our wider range audiences, when you want to have a can of Coca-Cola, but all in the house is Pepsi. Sometimes Pepsi's okay, and
Fair.
yeah,
Good point. Good
Coca-Cola.
point.
No,
Coke.
no, usually no funny stuff. I think I'm too old for that now.
Doc's trying to kill me over here.
Oh, man.
Matt, how about you? Any indies that have been released in the last decade inspired from Simon's Quest? Your thoughts on
No,
that?
here we go.
All right, so as soon as you asked this question, as soon as you sent it in the email before, I immediately got my 2022 game of the year in my head, Infernax. Infernax is a fantastic
That's my
indie
answer.
game.
That was my answer.
Sorry, had to steal it.
No, it's great.
But that game, man, I'm telling you, I had no expectations going into that game. All I heard was it's a Castlevania clone, and naturally, I had to jump on it. And so then when I played it, I was just like, oh my God, this game takes the best aspects of Zelda 2 and Castlevania 2, and it just mishmashes them both together. I love that game. Like I said, it's my 2022 game of the year. So yeah, that game right there, especially when you have Farrell taking Hollow Knight from me.
And the soundtrack for Infernax is absolutely phenomenal. It's
Yes.
fantastic.
Yes.
I'm just
man.
surprised you picked one. He's like the Metroidvania god. That's all he plays.
Oh yeah, yeah.
You
I
only brought
could have.
one to the
I could
table.
have.
I'm disappointed, Belmont.
I could have, man. But Infernax is the one that as soon as I think of a game that is like Castlevania 2, it's just like Infernax. Instantly.
I've never played it. I may need to check it out if both of you think it's that good.
Yeah, it's fantastic. One of the games that feels similar to that and really is a inspiration of it is the Transylvanian adventure of Simon Quest, and it's a game that isn't out yet. There was like a pre-beta demo I think that was on
I
Steam.
played said demo.
When I went to Too Many Games this year, I actually played the actual demo booth that was set up like physically there, and I think that was the alpha demo that was available to certain like content creators or something like that. But you really get the whole Castlevania 2 vibe from it. But I mean, literally with a name like the Transylvania Adventure of Simon Quest.
Yeah.
It really is that sort of guts and everything, but HG, knowing how similar that this particular game and I know you really stick with the retro content. Any interest in playing said upcoming game?
100% actually, yeah, because I have been following the development of that game for many years. Like it's only, I think, recently gotten the spotlight shone on it a little more, but the person who's been working on it, well, I wouldn't say creeping on their account and quietly, because I've never interacted with this person, but I've been keeping a close eye on it just because of how fun Simon's Quest was. And I thought, well, if somebody's going to be doing something that will kind of reinvent that and repackage it into something more modern, I'd love to try that, hands down, because it seems like it's just an extension of everything that the original game kind of put into motion. So, heck yeah, I'd be all over that. And
Nice.
I can't wait for it to come out. I might not play it on stream or anything because usually I have never left the retro category. Actually, I don't usually leave that at all. So I would probably not maybe stream it, but I definitely play it on my own time and just mess around with it a little bit. I was gonna say fiddle around. It sounded like I was gonna say something else. No, definitely just fiddle around with it, mess around with it. Like, oh, I'm speaking to some people on the internet. Maybe I should not swear. Okay, there it is. Yep, yep. I'd love to play it. It sounds like a good time.
Nice. Maybe I've still thrown you with my Coke comment. I don't know.
Yeah, bad influence, right?
Exactly.
He really is.
Yeah, nice. I know that I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what the game will look like as a full completed product. And like you said, it's been something. It really feels like a labor of love. Which, by the way, this is not sponsored at all by them or anything. It's just I've had positive experience not only following but also playing demos and whatnot. But yeah, definitely looking forward to what the final product is gonna finish up and look like. Farrell, what are your thoughts? Any interest in playing Transylvania Adventure of Simon Quest?
Do you want me to go next? This is a wet blanket answer. Do you want to save it for last, or do you want me to go now?
No, I want you to go now because
Sure,
I'm gonna ask Mad last, and I know he's gonna
sure.
be the opposite of that.
Yeah, I was excited to hear about it. Saw the trailer. I've seen a few things on it, and for me, it's too derivative of too many things. I think I even remember seeing a boss fight in there that was from Super Metroid. It was the plant guy that shoots
Oh
like the little
yeah, I know exactly what you're
spores.
talking about.
And I was like, that's the same exact fight as Super Metroid. It's like it's cool that so inspired by it, but I want to see something new, if you will. Like it almost feels like one of those games where was that Super Mario Remix or whatever they call it? It's a fan game where you could play as like Bill Riser
Oh yeah, that's
from
right.
Contra or Belmont or Mega Man and Link and all that stuff. Kind of felt kind of like that. And I understand, hey, it's a fan project, right? It's a passion project. But for me, it was just a little too derivative and it kind of turned me off, actually. It was just a little bit too much of the same.
No, that's fair. It's one thing to have a game be a love letter to like a game or series of games, kind of like what Sea of Stars was for Chrono Trigger and Super Mario RPG. But it's another to pull exact what looks like the exact things to be able to uh sort of lack that identity. I'm hoping that fights like that just look like it and to help, catch your eye and be like, it's like that Leonardo DiCaprio meme, and then you point at the screen and
Oh
everything
yeah,
like that.
yeah. I
Uh,
know what you're talking about.
I'm hoping that that's all that is, but you definitely sort of are the wet blanket to my hype train. I'm no longer hyped, and I don't want it to. No, no. Like seriously, it's good to have that sort of cautious nature, so that when I pick it up, because I'm still gonna get it. I can let you know, Farrell, as to whether or not it exceeds mine and maybe your expectations.
I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to you trying to convince me otherwise, but we shall see. We shall see.
Good
We'll have
luck
that
with that.
conversation.
That's impossible. I've tried that 1,000 times. Doesn't work.
Red, how about you? Any interest in checking out Transylvania Adventure?
Nope.
You're good?
Nope. I'm good. Yep. Nope. I got too many other games to play. Most of that stuff, it's not my thing. I avoid a lot of those. But I mean, hey, it looks like it could be fun for somebody. I know Belmont will play it, I'm sure. So he'll tell me all about it in a call for 2 hours. He does.
Matt, how about you?
Well, just like Rad said, I am going to be jumping all over this as soon as it comes out because that's what I do. I play all these types of clones and all these indie games and stuff like that. So as soon as I saw the trailer for it, I was like, oh my God. And I even made a video on it. I went and
Called
Retroware
Rad.
themselves. Thank you for that, by the way. But yeah, Rad let me know about it, and I had to make a video on it, and I did. As soon as I did, Retroware went and sent me that demo, that pre beta demo, and I played that. That was phenomenal. That right there sold me on the game. As soon as I
Excellent.
played that demo, I was just like, "Yep, I'm in."
Nice. Yeah, I'm like I said, hoping that it'll be even more polished with the final thing. Maybe we can pull Farrell to our side, maybe. But I will be honest when I play it through, and I will give an honest take. Like if it's something to where like, yeah, Farrell, if you want a greatest hits of Super Metroid and Symphony of the Night, maybe this isn't going to be for you. Um, but if it's something that is a kind of a newer experience that pays homage, and I really feel like that's why Infernax really hit the right notes, because you could tell it took a lot of inspiration, but it was its own thing. It had its own identity, and I mean, come on, the main guy uses a mace. You never see characters use a mace in any of these games. So,
Not
but
to mention, you don't see too many pixelated style games using choice and consequence like that game does.
yeah, that is true. That is, I always forget that with an Infernax, because so I usually do the goody two shoes route. Did you do the evil route to Infernax, Mad?
I was in the middle of a playthrough of that actually here
Ah,
recently because I want to get the platinum trophy for it, and you got to do that in order to get a trophy for it. So yeah, I was working on it.
gotcha. Yeah, maybe when I replay it, I might do that. Probably not. We really wouldn't have games like Infernax, future games like the Transylvania Adventure, and then classics like Hollow Knight had it not been for Castlevania 2, Simon's Quest. And so just a huge shout out to the fantastic developers, to Konami before they were a pachinko machine factory. Just You really
Oh,
had some of
sad face.
the best games in that era, and Konami was such a fantastic developer, and even more so. Huge shout out to our fantastic guests here. We really appreciate you joining us to discuss such a favorite game. Make sure again, and we're going to make sure to have links in the description below for their various YouTube sites, if they're located on Twitch, their various socials and everything. check out their YouTube channels, do a sub, hit that bell for notifications because they got some really fun video game related content. Before we call it, any parting shots? Parting shots before we head out.
All I gotta say, for my parting shot, Farrell, I am jealous of that inbox copy of Super Castlevania 4. I did not expect to see that.
This is original. This is actually original. This my brother had this still. He had a bunch of my our old gaming stuff, and he's like, "Hey, I got Castlevania 4 still." Like, what? He still had this. So yeah, he held on to it for all these years. It was Toys R Us had come across like I think a pallet. This was like in 1998, I want to say, of like Castlevania, Super Castlevania 4 games. And so they had like they have those bins on the floor, like those wire bins,
Yeah.
like we put clearance stuff in. It was a huge giant bin filled with these for like $7.99. So of course we had to buy it.
Nice.
Oh my god, if I would have ran into that, I literally, no joke, probably would have bought like 5 or 6 of them.
Oh, nice.
Fox, I imagine our conversation will go something like this when it comes to the Transylvania adventure. Because I'll probably say something like, perhaps the same could be said of all indie games. And then you would say,
perchance it could.
you're supposed to say, your words are as empty as your soul.
Oh my gosh. I think the last time that I played Symphony of the Night, I played the crappy retranslated Requiem version. So yeah, I don't have the older correct translation, the what is a man? A miserable pile of secrets. Yeah, it's been too long since I've seen that. Oh, why did they have to retranslate?
Joke fail.
Rad, any parting shots?
I got nothing.
You got nothing.
I got
Grumbles?
nothing. Great show.
I have no shots. I just wanted to say thanks again. This was really fun. It's not really a shot, but it's just gratitude. So thanks for having me on.
No worries. And thank you again to our fantastic audience. We appreciate you joining us, and we hope that you have a great and spooky night.